This is the Money Loves Women podcast, the podcast that guides women to wealth and an extraordinary life. Here's your host, Dr. Deborah Ekstrom.
This is Dr. Deborah Ekstrom for the Money Loves Women podcast. Today I'd like to welcome Stephanie Scott. Stephanie's trained as a lawyer and she works in the glamorous field of media, film, and television, which she just told me a few minutes ago is more glamorous than criminal law, although that also can be very interesting area. She has a passion for the creative industries and she has a unique combination of practical industry and legal experience, as you might imagine. So welcome to the program, Stephanie. I'm so glad to have you on. I'm excited to hear all about your life because media and film is a really glamorous area to be working in, and I want to hear what that's like for women. We've had a couple other women on in media with very, very interesting and exciting lives. And I don't know if that applies, if you think that applies to you or not. But anyway, we're glad to have you on. And I know you're up late there out in Australia. We're pleased that you can come to us from Australia. So welcome to the program. Tell us a little bit about your growing up years, what your early years were like, and what kind of influences you had in your life that led you ultimately in this direction.
Thanks very much, Deborah. It's really great to be speaking to you. A bit about me. I grew up in Brisbane in Queensland in Australia, which is sometimes compared with Florida, but we love it. And I now live in Sydney, which is one of the larger capital cities. I've been living here for about 12 years. Growing up in Brisbane was pretty idyllic, and I don't think that I was a particularly academic or dedicated kid. I sort of floated through school enjoying myself, and then I thought about what I wanted to do when I finished school, and I'd always been very interested in storytelling and film, so I thought I wanted to be a producer. And so I went to university and did not go to a practical university where there was hands-on film and television courses. I did quite a lot of theoretical subjects in a business degree and an arts degree. So I finished school not really sure, university not really sure where I would end up or how I would get there, but I was lucky enough to be on exchange in Montreal at McGill University for a year in my undergrad, and I got the opportunity to work for 3 months as an intern at the National Film Board of Canada. So they were prepping for the cultural village for the Vancouver Olympics, and I got to be a production assistant, and I came back to Australia absolutely dedicated to being a producer. And so I worked towards that for a couple of years, and I ended up landing in Sydney 12 years ago, and I worked for Warner Brothers, and I was still on the path to becoming a producer when I started to work within the studio system in the production team and realize what the lawyers actually did. And so I started thinking, well, maybe I could do that. And so I went back and did a Juris Doctor, which is not the most common approach in Australia. I think in the States, people tend to do their Juris Doctor after they've done an undergraduate degree, but quite often here people go straight from school into law school. So
straight from high school into law school?
Yeah, yes, that's right.
And let me stop you real quick because you said you were kind of on the track to becoming a producer. Mm-hmm. And I want to go back to Toronto too and find out how you fell into that. But
okay.
On the track to becoming a producer, and then you saw what lawyers do in the media industry. So what did you see? What do they do in the media industry?
They problem solve, actually. They resolve all of the issues as best they can that productions are having from a legal perspective, whether that is somebody trying to bring their dogs illegally into the country, not via customs, and being banned from entering the country again, and then the studio having a panic attack because they've signed one of those actors on for a future film and they won't be able to return to shoot it. And yes, putting out fires, really.
Oh, that's really interesting. So they're basically legal engineers solving problems left and right to make sure that piece or those pieces of media are handled and you can proceed with shootings, because there is so many different facets of what's required to actually put something into production, right?
Absolutely.
And so the legal team is making sure that it happens from that point of view. So that's pretty interesting. So before we go on with your legal career, I see production. You like production. You're actually a creative and you like the social aspects of things rather than the math science stuff, right? Which is,
Absolutely. You don't
but you,
ask a lawyer to do maths. We're words people.
you're words people and problem solving people.
Mm-hmm.
So you went to McGill University on exchange. First of all, why did you decide to do that? I mean,
I
Australia is beautiful and warm, and Toronto's pretty cold.
it's It's always, if you haven't seen snow before in your life, it's actually quite enticing to go somewhere where it snows. And I wanted to be in North America because I have quite a lot of family in North America and I hadn't been before. And I was about 22 and I thought, well, this is a good opportunity to study abroad. And my parents said flat out, no, are you going to the US? They have school shootings there. So
Yes.
yes, so that was the late 2000s. So I thought, well, I would love to be in a French speaking city. So Montreal seemed like an excellent choice. And they had a great film program that I was able to get transfer credits in. So that was great.
Okay. Sorry, I said Toronto. It was actually Montreal. And
Yes,
yes,
Montreal.
Montreal's French speaking, but no less cold than Toronto.
No, very, very cold.
Very
I
cold.
mean, we don't do Fahrenheit, so I find it difficult, but negative 37 degrees is pretty damn cold.
That's pretty, yeah, that's very cold. Yeah, that's very,
Mm,
very cold. Okay. So we don't have to even translate that into Fahrenheit because if that was Fahrenheit, it'd still be cold and it's way
yeah.
colder in Celsius. So how did you fall into the whole film thing in Montreal?
Uh, well, I knew that going to the Northern Hemisphere would provide more opportunities because although we obviously have a great film industry in Australia, it's quite a bit larger in North America. And so I didn't want to waste the opportunity. So I did an exchange subject in Canadian cinema and I spoke with the lecturer and I asked if he knew of any producers or anyone that I could do some interning with when I finished the school year. And he put me in touch with an excellent executive producer who worked at the film board and she took me on for 3 months and I got to be just a runner basically doing all kinds of things and I absolutely loved it and thought, right, I'm going to be just like her when I grow up. I'm going to be a
Ah,
producer.
so she was a great role model for you. You got into that.
Absolutely.
But it sounds to me like it was a lot more intentional than you originally made it sound. There was a lot of
Well,
intention around it.
there was a lot of intention to become a producer and a lot of setting up opportunities and trying to achieve a certain end goal. But when I got into the production studio or the production office on some feature films that Warner Brothers were making, when I got finally worked through university and got those opportunities, I realized that it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I felt just personally that I wanted some financial security. And I wouldn't be happy working 3 months at a time and then being unemployed and looking for my next role.
I get it. Yeah, that makes sense to recognize that. So, of the first of all, I want to ask you about careers in media
Mm-hmm.
and television and film. I want to ask you where you think you can get real satisfaction and fulfillment out of working there, but still really do well in terms of what you saw, some
Mm-hmm.
financial return on your investment of time and training.
I think that the stable jobs are working in a salaried position as an employee at a production company. Unfortunately, they're not a dime a dozen. And so finding your way into those roles can be quite difficult. And so I think there's quite a bit more of the freelancing and just backing yourself. If you're a writer, if you're an executive, or you want to be an executive who comes up with development of content and ideas, those kinds of roles you can't find a graduate track for that like you can in the banking sector or something like that. So there are lots of opportunities, at least in Australia, through our federal funding agencies and state funding agencies who have accelerator and talent programs. So I think that that would be a good way to start. But sort of, I guess, stability is not really something that's synonymous with the entertainment sector.
Okay, good to know. How about law?
Law is
entertainment law.
very stable, and
Yeah.
there are certain tracks you can take. I hadn't fully appreciated when I went back to study law, having worked in film, that I wouldn't be able to just do my degree and suddenly be a film lawyer. I hadn't appreciated that, just like anything, I would need to do about 5 years of just grunt work, learning how to be a lawyer before anyone in the film and TV sector would be interested in me advising them. And I was very fortunate to do that in an intellectual property practice, which sort of, I guess, was paralleled to the areas of law that I would be practicing while still teaching me the fundamentals. And I think in law, many people get shunted down a route where they go through top tier firms. They become they do summer internships or graduate programs, and then they get hired as paralegals. And then when they graduate, they're graduate lawyers. And there's a real traditional trajectory for the media sector. Obviously, I was very focused on having done a law degree specifically to be a film and TV lawyer, and I wasn't
Yes.
going to deviate on that path. I didn't suddenly decide that I wanted to do family law or criminal law. So my path was more to get as much experience as possible and then find my way back to film. And I did that through working at the IP firm and then working at our national broadcaster, which is a little bit like PBS in the States, and very, very good quality and highly recognized and much loved by the Australian people. And they are the absolute premier of children's content. So I went into the children's content team as a legal person, and I was also doing comedy and drama development and on a maternity contract. So that was quite stable. I think the stability comes from working in-house in roles or in law firms. It's certainly not piecemeal like media work is. And then I had the opportunity after this maternity leave cover to take up the reins and lead the development of the film and television practice at a well-established boutique firm that had been specializing in music for 20 years, but now wanted to expand into the film and TV and media sectors in ways that they'd practiced before, but never had one central person sort of taking the charge and building that area. So for 18 months, I've been leading the film and TV practice, and I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so that's very, very revealing. First of all, there's glamour in the media industry, but there's instability in a lot of it. And that works for some people, honestly. It works fine for some people. For other people, it feels too risky. So for you, you found an area where you had a lot of stability. There's another thing that you brought up that I want to point out. You took the reins for someone else who was on maternity leave. And it's very nice for companies to take the opportunity to expand the skill sets of people they have within their companies when someone goes on maternity leave or illness leave or something like that. And that can be a great opportunity, whereas some companies look at it as, oh, this is going to be terrible, we're losing this person for a while, where in fact they can bring someone else along. So that's great. I want you to contrast for me just a little bit, because you now know a little bit about Canadian film industry, you know about Australian film industry, and you clearly know about U.S. Film industry. Contrast those for me as far as what you think women's opportunities and women's function within each one of those are. Is it better in one place than another, or is it good everywhere? How is it for women for opportunity in that industry?
I think there are plenty of opportunities, but I certainly don't think there's parity and with men. And I obviously there's a completely different financing model for film in the US and Australia. So from my experience, people might pitch an idea to a studio, and if they like it, they'll say, what's your budget? Here's the money, now make it within that budget. Whereas in Australia, we don't have a studio system, so you need to really work to pull your finance plan together. So you would be going to a broadcaster for a broadcaster license and potentially equity investment, and then you would get bridging loans for tax rebates that you've had pre-approved. And it's a hard road. And so to go back to the question of women, I think, I'm not an expert, but certainly there are men who men are often more confident than women. They're often more willing to stand back themselves when they don't necessarily have the experience for something that a woman who has 3 times the experience might feel not as confident about putting themselves forward for. And so I can just imagine a line of men going into the studio system in the US and saying, absolutely, we can make this movie, and convincing people. And I don't know what the stats are, but obviously you watch the Oscars and you see how many directors are female versus male. I think one of the benefits in Australia, at least, is that we have quite a lot of accelerator programs for women, specifically for developing talent. I don't think that necessarily corresponds with how funding's allocated, but there are quite a lot of criteria for how funding is decided. It's not purely based on the idea, it's based on people's understanding of the demographic and who they're making who their audience is, and the track record of the team. And obviously there's so many things that go into how you progress and how you get a track record and opportunities that open up. So I think it's a struggle for everyone in the media sector, but I certainly think that sometimes the odds are stacked against women and they don't necessarily have the same level of confidence, but I think they should, because often female content is excellent in different ways from excellent content that's made by men. So, and when it's a combination of male and female teams, you get some excellent content. So, I mean, I think it's all about money, really, and financing things that gets in the way often. If we had all the money in the world, everyone would be making content.
Yes, absolutely. That's very interesting observation. What about Canada? Is Canada similar to the United States, or do they finance films in a different way?
I think that they're a bit of a hybrid between Australia and the US. I imagine that because of the proximity to the US, that they have sort of offshoots of studios in that space. And I know that a ton of filming is done in Canada, but it's not necessarily Canadian led. So they're hiring people, but it's not necessarily Canadians at the helm. And I also know that they have a similar funding system of a national film board in the way that we have Screen Australia. And I, having volunteered there as an intern, got to see how that works. And they have a different system altogether, whereas we sort of say, okay, you've qualified, here's the money, go make your project. They seemed to have more of a they allocate an executive producer and a creative team and provide sort of practical studio facilities, recording studios, animation, things like that, whereas we don't provide those facilities. We just provide the funding to access those facilities. So, I mean, they're all quite different, but that doesn't mean one is necessarily better than the other. I know that it's a lot harder without the studio system behind you to get something up.
Yes, we heard a little bit about that. We heard a little bit about that from another person who talked about their funding and what happened when their set burned down.
Right. Yes, that's
in Australia. In Australia,
added technical difficulty there when your set burns down. But
yes.
I spend a lot of my time, I'd say 30% of it being a pure black letter law lawyer who's writing and drafting terms and conditions and clauses, and a lot of my time talking to people and explaining the commercial way that they can do things and advising them on opportunities available to them and how to structure their chain of title and what kind of documents they need and why they might do something one way over the other. And I really like that. I think that I see a lot of parallels between what a producer does, sort of corralling. They say it's like herding cats, but they're looking after all the different departments on the film and problem solving and putting out fires every day. And I think that lawyers do a lot of that as well and do a lot more hand holding and guiding than people would imagine. At least I do.
Yes. I think you're a bit unusual, honestly, Stephanie, in that you seem to be very strong in the creative, as well as have a little bit of an engineering mind, which engineers are problem solvers. And then you have the sort of owl personality there going too, with all the making sure all of the I's are dotted and T's are crossed and everything's done right. So that's not a common combination of personality traits and talents. So good for you for finding your niche. One of the things you said I want to follow up on, and I want to get your impressions. You said one of the things that happens is men will put themselves forward regardless of, whether they have everything in place in terms of being able to do something, whereas a woman with 3 times as much experience and capability and so forth might be reluctant because she doesn't have the confidence. Why do you think that is? Because I hear that over and over and over.
I don't know. When I think about it, I've also experienced the same. I mean, people shout about imposter syndrome, and I certainly experience it. Most days I feel like a little kid, wearing mom's high heels and walking into the office, and someone's going to tell me that I'm the expert and they need my help. And I have to remind myself that, yes, you do have a lot of experience and you do probably know the answer and you can help them, and you're not just pretending and they're not going to find out that you don't know anything. And so I think that a lot of people feel that way, and I don't know where it comes from or why. And it's unfortunate, but power to the people who don't feel that way. But I think that those who do, and it's quite common, I talk to my girlfriends and colleagues, female colleagues, about it, and everyone feels it. And we just remind ourselves that if we felt the same way about ourselves as we do about our admiration for our girlfriends and our female colleagues, then we would all be feeling a lot better about it.
I had one person, I don't know how you handle this, but I had one person who said what she tried to do was be her own best friend, like her own best girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
to stand back outside of herself and cheer herself on, looking back at accomplishments and then forward into projecting where those accomplishments could take her. And I liked that a lot. What do you do? Do you garner support from your fellow female professionals? How do you manage it? How do you manage the imposter syndrome sort of, I don't have the confidence to do this thing?
Actually, we talked about it. We have we use Slack in the office, and we have a channel for the non-senior female staff members, which we really should expand to all the non-senior staff members. It's just that prior to very recently, we only had female non-senior staff members. We've recently hired a male non-senior staff member, so I shouldn't leave him out. But we talked about our smile file. So in our email inbox, we keep a folder, and we put any positive feedback we receive from partners, colleagues, and also most importantly, our clients. Often people are very generous at the end of a matter, and they'll tell you just how much you've helped them or made them feel secure or less stressed about things, and just how much it's meant to them that you've been able to make things seem so straightforward, and that kind of stuff you just sometimes dismiss as, someone just saying the right things at the end of the matter. But I think that mostly those things are very genuine, and I like to think that that's literally why I go to work, to reduce the stress on people, because I know how when you don't know about something, it all blows out of proportion. And for me, oftentimes it is men who are coming to me as the expert, who are much older than me, and having them say, it shouldn't be this way, but having them say, you've really made this make sense, and it's not at all as scary as we thought it was, reminds me that I do have a lot to bring, and that it's important and it contributes. So we save it to the smile file, and sometimes when you need a boost, you can have a flick through that and remind yourself that it's not all as bad as your brain's telling you.
That's a really great idea. Have a smile file. So all of you are doing that. That's great. I had a coach one time, and she told me at the end of the day to journal about all the accomplishments, all you've accomplished that day. And I think it does a couple of things. It drives you forward toward thinking about accomplishment, but more importantly, it reminds you that there's a lot of good things that have come out of the day, the week, the month, and the year, and that you are capable, and that you do have skills and talents that are very valuable in the workplace. And I think that's wonderful that you have men coming to you and saying those things to you who are older than you. But it is hard to convince ourselves sometimes, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And I don't know the answer either. I think there's some of it. I talked to a documentary filmmaker just recently, and I think she said something about sort of this societal expectation of us as women that's just woven into our culture and our beings, where women are expected to be supportive and helpers, but not necessarily in the forefront. And I think that's woven into our brain a little bit, which is part of the lack of confidence. Like, am I really in the role I'm meant to be, that culture expects of me and that I expect of myself and others expect of me? When in fact, in action, we really are a little bit more objective at looking at our peers and our colleagues and applauding our female peers and colleagues, all of them actually, but women especially, in their accomplishments. And that's why I think it's nice to stand outside yourself and be your own best friend. Stand out there and say, wow, that was a good job. I think we're also taught, I think we get mixed up between positive feedback for ourselves and pride, and being overly proud, and humility, and some of that comes with our culture as well. But I think it's fine and appropriate and good. And I think men are more self-congratulatory than women.
I think you're right. And the other problem we face in Australia is something called tall poppy syndrome. I think that it's not something you see as much. And sometimes I think that it's a bit of a cultural shock to see the way that people in the States sometimes are confident in their ability to talk about their successes and the things that they're proud of about themselves. Whereas we would tend not to do that because you'll be shut down as, grandstanding or being full of yourself. It's just not the Australian way. You can be quietly confident or happy with what you've done, but you shouldn't talk about it. And certainly it's nice to feel in the States, I guess, that people are confident and happy and able to do that without, showboating or being a tall poppy.
Yes, I think there's a difference between bragging and being appropriately self-promotional,
Yes.
self-congratulatory. And I think I like to congratulate other women for the accomplishments they've done, because they often underestimate their impact, their ability to be a role model, which I see in you, and to congratulate themselves for what they've done when they're very much in tune with congratulating other people for their achievements and accomplishments and impact. And I'm really pleased to hear that you go to work and get fulfillment out of helping other people solve their problems and decrease their stress level. I just think that's absolutely fabulous.
I think that what you've said about role models is also very important, because I've found that all the way through, even when I was a little girl, like outside of the family unit, I always looked to other women as role models, and I could list 12 in a heartbeat of people who I've looked up to who've really, really put me on their shoulders and been my cheerleader through every stage and every interest of my life. And I keep in touch with those people, and it's a bit embarrassing, but so nice to hear when you see someone after 10 years and they want to hear what you've done since the last time they saw you, and they say they're so proud of what you've achieved. And it's not something that should be embarrassing, but it's just so nice to have those people in your life. And so now that I'm reaching a stage in my career where there are quite a lot of people who are younger than me in the firm, and also just generally in life because I'm getting old, I'm looking for opportunities to be that mentor now. So I volunteer through my alma mater as a legal professional mentor to graduates and to law students. And I think that's really important, because there's such a disconnect between law school and practicing as a lawyer that you just can't appreciate until you've taken that step. And also just the fear of what you don't know that's coming when you're a graduate or a law student. So I work with girls or women who are still at law school, and also try to assist the women in my practice as well, with any way that we can help each other. We all do.
That's outstanding.
And then
Good for
again,
you.
there are female partners in the law firm who support the junior lawyers as well. So it's at all levels. And I think it's really important, and to have those mentors outside of work as well.
Absolutely true. I love that you stay in touch with those people.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
got some that I've been in touch with for 20 years,
Yes.
and still try to see what they're doing and let them know what I'm doing intermittently.
That's really great networking, and it's great ongoing mentorship. So they've become role models for you in terms of how to mentor other people, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And so they've gone now, some of them from a long time ago have gone from being mentors to friends now, but they're still an example of what was really, really supportive and helpful when I was younger.
All very revealing. Thank you for those pearls and for that role model itself. If you were going to give some counsel to women, how they can, from your life and your experiences, how they can be more successful, more proactive in creating their own success and their own financial security, and perhaps beyond financial security, what would you say?
Security in themselves generally, I would say that you know yourself better than anybody else, and so you shouldn't take on the opinions that you manage to collect from other people about how they see you, because it's not going to paint an accurate picture, and you probably know that deep down, but it's easy to believe what you hear, in performance reviews and just comments from other people. And then I work with a lot of people who are creative. So I think in terms of protecting your assets, if you are a creator, I say, consult a lawyer, get advice on how to protect things if you're developing content with somebody. Everyone's friends until they're not friends. And so we work in worst case scenarios, and we try to set things up so that there's a plan when things go pear-shaped. So I would say I couldn't advise anyone on how to really, protect themselves, structure their wealth, finance, other than to say that if you have a skill or something that is, even if it's an intellectual endeavor, it has value, it's worthwhile, and if you're capitalizing on that, you need to protect it.
Very good. Good advice. Good advice from a lawyer.
Yeah.
Make sure that you... it's fine to do things on a handshake, but make sure you have it down in writing so you both are on the same page if you're making deals. I love that. Okay, good protection. So that falls into taking responsibility for your money and protecting your money in an appropriate way with a legal expert who knows what they're talking about. And then I think the other piece of advice you gave us through this whole interview was figure out where you fit in the scheme of things, whether or not you need steady work as an employed person to create your excess cash flow, or you're investing, presumably savings and investing, or are you a person who can sort of fly and you're a free-willing creative, and that can work too as long as you set it up in the right way. So just figure out who you are and then go with that and be content with that. And the other thing that I think I heard from you today, Stephanie, is that you can find fulfillment in a particular industry if you can find the right fit for yourself. And it sounds to me like you have a very, very fulfilling career.
I do. I really enjoy it. And I think that I could find fulfillment in other ways within the legal sector. Because pretty much every lawyer is helping people, mostly, I think, if they have the right intentions. So if suddenly I was to decide that film wasn't for me, there could certainly be other ways that I would still continue to be working as a lawyer, or I could just completely leave the law and try to go back into the creative side. I don't know what the future holds. I think I'm probably not going back to the creative side, but I love working with people who are in that space.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing with us today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Congratulations on the accomplishments you have. I want to be one of those women who stands with you and recognizes your accomplishments and what you've done and what you're doing and what you're going to be doing. All of those things. So Congratulations on that. I'm proud to know you, and I'm proud that you're a woman in this field.
Thank you very much.
This is Dr. Deborah Ekstrom for the Money Loves Women podcast. To your health, to your wealth, and to your happiness. May blessings rain down upon you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Money Loves Women podcast. Please leave us a rating and review so we know how we can improve. Visit moneyloveswomen.com to gain more insight into how to live an extraordinary life.